I'll pay $50,000 to anyone who can make this baby stop crying." The words sliced through the tension in first class like a blade. Gasps echoed. Heads turned. And for a moment, everything stood still, except the baby, who wailed louder, her tiny lungs somehow amplifying desperation into chaos. It was supposed to be a routine flight from New York to San Francisco. But somewhere over Colorado, Flight 771 had become a pressure cooker at 35,000 feet. Business travelers rubbed their temples. A couple with matching eye masks whispered arguments. And in seat 1A, billionaire tech mogul Grant Whitmore was unraveling. Grant was known for controlling markets, commanding boardrooms, and reshaping the fintech landscape. But today, none of that mattered. Not the five-figure suit he was sweating through. Not the designer baby gear he'd packed. Not even his PR team's carefully curated image of America's most eligible widowed father. Because his infant daughter, 9-month-old Ella, had been crying nonstop since takeoff. And nothing helped. Not white noise. Not iPads. Not even the organic teether designed by Swiss pediatricians. For over 3 hours, the cries tore through the cabin like a siren nobody could silence. That's when she appeared. She wasn't in first class. She wasn't even a passenger. Just a black waitress in a crew apron, called in last minute to cover for a sick flight attendant. But she stood there at the curtain, calm, collected, her voice quiet but firm. "Sir, I think I can help." All eyes locked onto her. Some skeptical. Some annoyed. A few visibly offended, as if she had crossed an invisible line. A woman like her, offering help to a man like him? On a plane like this? But what happened next changed everything. This isn't just a story about a crying baby or a stressed-out CEO. This is a black story about instincts over status, heart over hierarchy, and a moment that rewrote the rules midair. If you're into powerful real-life stories that start with chaos and end with connection, stay tuned. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a quick comment and let us know where you're joining this journey from. Now take a breath and buckle up. This flight's about to get emotional. Her name was Lila James. To most people on that plane, she was invisible. Just another flight attendant in a navy blue apron, hair tied back, name tag clipped on. The kind of person you think without looking. The kind of woman you notice only when your drink is late or your tray table won't lock. But that day, Lila James was more than a server at 35,000 feet. She was a force of nature disguised in polyester and polite smiles. At 27, Lila had learned more about patience, pressure, and people than most executives twice her age. She didn't have degrees from Ivy League schools. She didn't have connections or capital or even a passport. But what she did have was instinct, and a kind of emotional fluency that can't be taught. She was beautiful, but not in the high-gloss magazine cover kind of way. Lila had a quiet beauty, the kind that lingers. Smooth brown skin, high cheekbones, and eyes so deep you felt like they knew what you were going to say before you said it. There was warmth in her smile, but also something sharper, like she'd seen too much and survived every bit of it. Lila grew up in East Oakland. Her mom worked double shifts at a care home until cancer took her when Lila was just 16. Her dad had been in and out of prison for as long as she could remember. That left Lila as the caretaker of two younger brothers, one with asthma, the other born 10 weeks premature. By the time she graduated high school, she could swaddle a baby in her sleep, handle a nebulizer with one hand, and calm a screaming toddler with the other. She never complained. Not once. Her motto was simple. Get through today, plan for tomorrow, protect your people. She'd always dreamed of becoming a pediatric therapist. But dreams take money, and money was something Lila never had. So she hustled. Waitressing, babysitting, picking up holiday shifts at the airport. Anything that moved her an inch closer to that dream. The airline gig wasn't permanent, it was survival. A friend in HR slipped her the opportunity. Short-term, minimum pay, no benefits. But it came with one perk, free standby flights. And on her days off, Lila would sit in the back of empty planes with a psychology textbook on her lap, highlighting words she didn't understand, determined to learn anyway. No one on that flight knew her story. But when she stepped forward, hands steady, voice calm, and heart wide open, it didn't matter. Because in that moment, Lila James wasn't just a black waitress trying to do the unthinkable. She was the only person on that plane who knew exactly what that baby needed. The day had started like any other for Lila James, fast, full, and barely on time. She had just finished a double shift at the 24-hour diner off International Boulevard, where the coffee never stopped flowing and the tips barely paid for gas. Her feet ached, and the scent of hash browns and bleach still clung to her clothes. She was headed home for a few hours of sleep when her phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Need emergency crew for 8:45 a.m. JFK to SFO. Uniform provided. One-time sub. Interested? Lila hesitated. Her head screamed, no. Her wallet said otherwise. She texted back, on my way. By the time she made it to JFK, the sun was rising over the terminal, casting long shadows on the polished floors. She changed in the staff locker room, smoothed her curls back into a tight bun, and splashed cold water on her face. She looked in the mirror. Tired, yes, but steady. She could do this. Meanwhile, across town in a luxury penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, Grant Whitmore was facing a different kind of chaos. He was a man who measured life in data points, quarterly earnings, shareholder reports, merger contracts. But that morning, all his numbers failed him. Because none of them explained how a bottle-fed, sleep-trained, premium-diapered baby girl could still scream at full volume. Ella was teething. Or tired. Or sensing his stress. He couldn't tell. All Grant knew was that his nanny had quit 2 days ago, his ex-wife had taken their private jet to Tokyo without warning, and his business class assistant had booked him on a commercial flight, saying it would be good optics for the press. He hated optics. He hated being out of control even more. Grant carried Ella like she was made of porcelain, terrified of breaking her, or worse, of not being enough. As he walked through the VIP lane at JFK, people recognized him. They always did. He offered nods and short smiles, but his mind was spinning. The idea of managing a cross-country flight alone with a baby felt like a hostile takeover with no board to back him up. Just before boarding, their paths crossed for the first time. Lila was checking inventory in the back galley when she turned and nearly bumped into him. She smiled instinctively. He didn't notice. His eyes were on Ella, who was starting to fuss. It was a moment. Small, fast, forgettable. But sometimes, the moments we don't remember are the ones that change everything. It started just 20 minutes after takeoff, soft at first, almost like a squeak. Grant barely noticed it at first. Ella shifted in his arms, let out a small whimper, then another. He adjusted her blanket, offered the pacifier, bounced gently the way the parenting blogs had suggested. But within minutes, the whimpers turned to cries. Then the cries sharpened into full-blown screams, slicing through the hum of the engines and pressing against every passenger's nerves like needles. Grant felt his heart drop. This wasn't just fussiness. It was the kind of cry that came from deep inside, the kind that didn't stop with toys or distractions. He checked her diaper. Clean. Offered a bottle. Rejected. Unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, pacing awkwardly down the narrow first-class aisle while whispering every soothing word he could remember. Ella didn't care. She screamed as if the cabin walls were closing in. As if she was trying to tell the entire world something it refused to hear. The flight attendants tried to help. One offered a warm bottle, another tried to rock her. A third handed Grant a lavender-scented sleep spray with a forced smile. None of it worked. One man across the aisle groaned audibly and threw a blanket over his head. A woman in heels and a Chanel scarf pressed her noise-canceling headphones tighter and sighed in exaggerated despair. Someone muttered, "This is why I don't fly commercial." Grant could feel the heat rise up his neck. He knew the looks. Knew the judgment. A crying baby on a plane wasn't news, but a billionaire unable to handle his own child? That would make headlines. He paced again, bouncing Ella harder now, trying to quiet her, to calm himself. Sweat trickled down his temple. His jaw clenched. From behind the curtain, back in economy, Lila heard it all. She had heard babies cry before, in stores, in restaurants, in the church nursery when moms couldn't stay long. But this was different. This wasn't just a baby. This was a baby in distress, surrounded by people who didn't know how to hear her. Lila closed her eyes, counted the rhythm of the cries, felt the pitch climb. She remembered that sound. She had once rocked her baby brother through nights just like this. Tiny body shaking, lungs full of grief, his whole world off balance. She looked toward the front of the plane, toward the noise, and something shifted in her chest. She couldn't sit still. Not anymore. By hour 2, the atmosphere in first class had shifted from frustration to fury. Ella was still screaming, her face beet red, tiny fists clenched like she was fighting the air itself. Grant looked like a man slowly unraveling in public, hair out of place, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. He was pacing again, now muttering to himself, pleading under his breath, rocking Ella in uneven, desperate movements. The passengers around him were no longer hiding their disdain. The man across the aisle leaned into the flight attendant, voice low but sharp. "Isn't there some kind of rule about removing disruptive passengers?" A woman 2 rows back added, "This is first class, not a daycare. We paid for comfort." Another chimed in, not even trying to whisper, "Some people shouldn't fly if they can't control their kids." Grant heard them all. Every comment hit him like a slap. He had built companies from nothing, negotiated billion-dollar deals, faced down Wall Street analysts and foreign investors. But nothing had prepared him for the shame of not being able to soothe his own daughter. In front of a cabin full of watching, whispering strangers. Back in the galley, Lila shifted her weight from one foot to the other, gripping a tray of empty cups she hadn't had time to clean. She heard every word too. And she felt it, the subtle shift that happened when a room turned against someone. It wasn't just about a baby crying. It was about status. It was about image. It was about who gets grace and who doesn't. And when she pulled the curtain back and stepped into the aisle, carrying nothing but calm and clarity, the air grew colder. She walked toward seat 1A, no hesitation, just quiet strength in her step. But before she could speak, a man in a pressed blazer leaned toward his seatmate and said under his breath, loud enough to land exactly where he meant it to, "Well, let's see if the help can do better than the billionaire." Lila heard him. She didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. The words rolled off her like water, but not because they didn't matter. Because she refused to give them power. When she reached Grant, he looked up, startled, exhausted, holding a sobbing child and 1,000 unspoken apologies in his eyes. "I think I can help," she said, voice steady. He blinked. Confused. Then desperate. Then skeptical. She saw it all, the flicker of doubt, the calculation behind his eyes, the hesitation that wasn't really about her qualifications, but about her skin, her uniform, her place on the plane. Still, she stood there. Quiet. Certain. Because when everyone else was judging, Lila James was listening. Not to the noise, but to the baby. And to what wasn't being said. For a long moment, Grant just stared at her. Lila stood there, hands open, not pushing, not pleading, just offering. Ella's cries echoed off the curved cabin walls, and it was clear something had to give. The flight attendant looked to Grant, silently asking whether to intervene. He shook his head, slowly, and then nodded to Lila. "Go ahead," he said, his voice dry, almost defeated. Carefully, Lila reached for the baby. Grant hesitated, his arms tightening slightly, as if part of him still wasn't ready to trust a stranger, especially one in an apron, especially one the cabin didn't expect to see holding his child. But another scream from Ella broke through his pride, and he let go. Lila took the baby gently, cradling her close. One hand supported Ella's neck. The other cupped the curve of her back. Her movements were practiced, instinctual, not stiff like training videos, but warm, fluid, human. She didn't shush the baby. didn't bounce or panic. She simply adjusted Ella against her shoulder and began to hum, low, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The cabin fell silent. Not because Ella had stopped crying yet, but because something about the way Lila moved, her stillness, her control, changed the atmosphere in the room. She tapped her fingers gently along Ella's back, not randomly, but with intention. Pressure points. Breath patterns. Lila's mother had called it body listening. It was about more than just soothing. It was about syncing your energy with a baby's, regulating them through calm, not noise. And slowly, it worked. Ella's cries shifted. They softened into hiccups. Her fists unclenched. Her breathing evened out. Within minutes, she was quiet. Eyes half closed, head nestled against Lila's collarbone, the storm passing with a final shaky exhale. In first class, mouths hung open. Eyebrows raised. A couple of passengers glanced at each other, confused. One man who had complained earlier now cleared his throat and looked away. Grant stared like he was watching a miracle. How did you do that?" he asked, voice barely audible. Lila didn't answer right away. She was too busy whispering something to Ella. Soft, soothing words, not meant for anyone else to hear. Then, calmly, she looked up. "Sometimes," she said, "they don't need a bottle or a screen or a 5-point plan. They just need someone who's not afraid to feel what they feel." No one responded. Not right away. Because what they had witnessed wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was something they couldn't explain, and would never forget. The unthinkable had happened. And a black woman in an apron had done it. Grant Whitmore had never felt this kind of silence before. Not in a boardroom, not during a press conference, not even in the privacy of his penthouse. It wasn't just the absence of Ella's cries. It was something else. A quiet that felt earned. He watched as Lila gently rocked his daughter, her body moving in rhythm with the subtle turbulence of the plane. Her hum had faded, but the effect lingered. Ella was asleep now, her small hand resting on Lila's shoulder like it had always belonged there. Grant cleared his throat, his voice suddenly unsure. "How did you know what to do?" he asked, eyes still fixed on his child. Lila didn't look up at first. She adjusted Ella's blanket, checked her breathing, then finally met his gaze. "My baby brother," she said softly. "He was born 3 months early. Tiny. Couldn't sleep more than an hour without screaming. The doctors gave us charts and routines, but none of it worked. My mom, she figured it out the hard way. She used to say, 'You don't calm a baby with your hands. You calm them with your nervous system.'" Grant blinked. "That wasn't something you learned at Yale." Lila continued, her voice low but steady. "It's about co-regulation. If I'm anxious, she's anxious. But if I'm grounded, she can feel that, even if she doesn't understand it yet. Babies don't need noise. They need presence." Grant exhaled slowly, like a balloon deflating. "I have experts. A whole team of them. Pediatricians. Sleep consultants. Child development specialists. No one ever told me that." Lila gave a small smile, kind, but without apology. Sometimes the people closest to the problem aren't the ones who get heard. That hit him. He looked down at Ella, finally resting, her cheeks no longer blotchy, her breathing soft and even. "She never sleeps like that with me," he admitted. Lila didn't respond with pity. She responded with truth. "You're not doing anything wrong," she said gently. "You're just not used to listening in this way. It's not about fixing her. It's about meeting her where she is." Grant leaned back in his seat, eyes unfocused. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he wasn't thinking about deadlines or headlines. He was thinking about connection. Real connection. And how a stranger had just taught him more in 10 minutes than all the books, blogs, and business plans ever had. The cabin lights had dimmed, signaling the start of quiet time, but the energy in seat 1A was anything but ordinary. Lila was still holding Ella, who now slept with the calm of a baby who finally felt heard. Her tiny chest rose and fell against Lila's collarbone, her fingers curling into the fabric of the apron like it was a favorite blanket. Grant sat beside them, silent, studying the woman in front of him with a new kind of focus. Not the analytical gaze of a CEO, but the searching eyes of a father who knew he was in the presence of someone rare. "Do you mind if I ask?" he began carefully. "Is this your full-time job?" Lila gave a small laugh. "Not exactly. I'm usually waitressing at a diner in Oakland. Today was a fill-in shift. They needed someone. I needed the cash." Grant nodded slowly, his jaw tightening a bit. "You're not trained in early childhood development?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "No degrees." "Not yet," she said. "I'm taking community college classes part-time, hoping to become a pediatric therapist someday. Long road, but I'm moving." He looked at her, blinking like something had clicked into place. "You should be running a childcare institute," he said, half to himself. Lila smiled politely but stayed grounded. She'd heard compliments before, the kind people give when they're surprised someone like her knows something they don't expect. "What about you?" she asked, turning the question gently. "You always travel with a baby and a panic attack?" Grant let out a dry laugh. "No, definitely not. I'm usually flying private, alone, and answering emails before we hit cruising altitude." She raised an eyebrow. "And today?" He looked down at Ella. "Today, I learned I don't know how to listen. Not the way that matters." For a few minutes, they sat in a quiet that wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, familiar, like a conversation between two people who understood what it meant to carry more than anyone knew. "You're not like I expected," Lila said suddenly, then paused. "I mean, billionaires don't usually ask real questions." He looked at her. "You're not like I expected either." Their eyes met. Not romantically. Not dramatically. Just honestly. Two people from two completely different worlds. One in designer shoes. One in non-slip soles. And somehow, in the middle of the sky, they had found common ground. Not because they had to, but because they chose to look past everything that told them not to. The seatbelt sign chimed softly overhead, but neither of them moved. Not yet. Because for the first time all flight, the plane didn't feel divided. It felt human. The peace didn't last long. Just as Lila gently began transferring the sleeping baby back into Grant's arms, a sharp voice cut through the calm. "Miss James," said a woman in a crisp blazer, stepping into the first-class cabin with a clipboard tucked under one arm. Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the kind that made people sit straighter. Lila turned, her posture instinctively tightening. "May I speak with you in the galley?" the woman asked, though it sounded more like a command. Grant glanced at Lila, then at the woman, sensing the tension. "Everything okay?" he asked. The woman smiled tightly, but not at him. "This won't take long." Lila handed Ella back to Grant, who now cradled his daughter with an awkward mix of pride and concern. Lila followed the supervisor to the back of the plane, past rows of sleeping passengers and flickering reading lights. The galley was dim and cold, the hum of the engines louder here. The door shut behind them. "What were you thinking?" the supervisor hissed, her professional mask slipping the moment they were out of sight. "You are not authorized to enter first class unless directly instructed by your section lead. You were working economy." Lila stood her ground. "I was trying to help." "That is not your job," the woman snapped. "You overstepped. And worse, you held a VIP passenger's child without clearance. Do you understand how serious that is?" Lila's throat tightened. She wanted to explain, to defend herself. But she knew how this went. She'd been in enough rooms like this. Small, cold, with someone in a blazer pointing out rules that always seemed to bend for everyone else. "I didn't think helping a crying baby needed permission," she said quietly. The supervisor crossed her arms. "It does when that baby belongs to someone with a private legal team and a public image. You could have cost us everything." Lila didn't reply. She just stared at the floor and took a slow breath. Then, from behind them, a voice. "She saved my daughter." They turned. Grant stood at the entrance of the galley, Ella asleep in his arms, his expression unreadable. "She didn't just help. She saved the flight. She saved me. And if you think I'm going to sit quietly while the one person who actually solved a problem gets punished for doing her job better than anyone else, you're mistaken." The supervisor opened her mouth, but no words came. "And one more thing," Grant added, stepping closer. "If this goes on her record, I'll be speaking to your legal department. Personally." Lila stared at him, stunned. The supervisor forced a smile, her voice suddenly sugar-sweet. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore. I'm sure we can clarify things." As the woman disappeared down the aisle, Grant looked at Lila. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah," he said. "I did." They returned to first class in silence. Ella was still sleeping, her small hand now curled around Grant's tie. The cabin had settled, the chaos of earlier now a distant memory. Some passengers were dozing, others scrolling their phones, but a few watched as Lila took her seat again in the empty spot beside Grant, this time without hesitation. Grant adjusted Ella gently, then looked over at Lila. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. His expression was thoughtful, searching. Finally, he spoke. "Have you ever considered working with children full-time?" Lila blinked, caught off guard. "I mean, yes. That's the dream. I'm studying for it." Slowly. "Why slowly?" She let out a quiet laugh. "Because books cost money. Because community college classes fill up fast. Because rent, groceries, and taking care of my brothers come first." Grant nodded like he understood more than she expected. "What would it take to make it happen faster?" he asked. Lila hesitated. "A miracle?" He smiled at that, but then his tone shifted, more serious now. "I'm not offering charity," he said. "But I do believe in investing in people who prove they know what they're doing, even when the world doesn't see it yet." She raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. "I own a network of early development centers in California," he explained. "We focus on high-emotion, trauma-informed childcare. We've been looking for someone to lead a new pilot program in San Jose. Until about an hour ago, I didn't know who that person was." Lila's breath caught. "I'm offering you a position," he said plainly. "A paid internship to start. Full tuition covered, any school you choose. Relocation assistance. And mentorship from our lead staff." She stared at him, stunned. "Why me?" "Because you did what no one else could," he said. "Not just for Ella. For me." Lila looked down at her hands, processing everything. Her world had just shifted, not gradually, but in a single sentence. "I'd need time," she whispered. "To think. To call my family. To believe this is even real." Grant nodded. "Take the time. But just now, I'm not offering this because of what you did for me on this plane. I'm offering it because of who you already are." Lila didn't speak. She couldn't. But deep down, something in her had already said yes. 1 week later, the morning sun cast soft light through the wide windows of the Harmony Child Development Center in San Jose, California. The front doors opened at 8 a.m. sharp, and in walked Lila James. No apron, no airline tag, no tray in her hands. Just a clean, collared blouse, dark jeans, and a simple messenger bag over her shoulder. Her curls were looser, more relaxed. Her yet more grounded. It didn't look like she was walking into her first day at a new job. It looked like she was walking into where she belonged. The front desk attendant greeted her with a warm smile. "You must be Ms. James. Mr. Whitmore's expecting you." Lila nodded, clutching the strap of her bag just a little tighter. She had barely slept the night before, not from nerves, but from wonder. Her call to her family, the stunned silence on the other end of the line, the happy tears from her aunt, the disbelief in her brother's voices. It had all played on a loop in her head. She had said yes. Not just to a job, but to a chance. A real one. As she walked through the center, she passed colorful classrooms filled with soft toys, baby laughter, and calming music. The walls were painted in warm tones. The air smelled like baby powder and fresh fruit. And everything, felt built with intention. In the back nursery, she found Grant. He was standing by a window, bouncing Ella gently in his arms, her tiny face resting against his shoulder. When he saw Lila, his whole face lit up. "You made it," he said simply. "I made it," she replied, her voice steady. He looked down at his daughter and smiled. "She's been a little fussy this morning. You want to say hi?" Lila reached out instinctively, her hands already moving with practiced grace. Ella's eyes widened at the sight of her, and she let out a soft, delighted sound, somewhere between a laugh and a coo. "She remembers," Grant said, surprised. "Babies remember safety," Lila replied. "Even if they don't have the words yet." They stood there for a moment, not boss and employee, not billionaire and waitress, just two people brought together by circumstance, now connected by choice. And in that quiet room, with the soft rhythm of a baby's breath between them, the decision no longer felt overwhelming. It felt right. Life doesn't always reward the loudest voice or the fanciest title. Sometimes, it rewards stillness, presence, the courage to listen when no one else does. Lila James wasn't supposed to be on that plane. She wasn't supposed to be in first class. And she certainly wasn't supposed to be the person who made a billionaire stop, reflect, and grow. But life has a way of flipping the script when we least expect it. That day in the sky, surrounded by whispered judgments and unseen rules, Lila didn't ask for permission to do what she knew was right. She stepped forward. Not to prove a point, but to answer a need. And because of that, a child found comfort. A father found humility. And a woman who had always known her worth finally had someone else recognize it, too. This isn't just a story about a crying baby. It's a reminder that empathy is not a service reserved for the rich. That wisdom doesn't always come with a degree. That sometimes the person you overlook is the one who holds the answer. So the next time you're sitting in your own version of first class, whether it's at work, at home, or in life, take a moment. Look around. Who's quietly showing up? Who's holding things together without the spotlight? That's your Lila. And maybe, just maybe, you're someone else's. If this story moved you, if you believe that the right moment can change a life, take a second to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We read every one. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because every week, we share true stories just like this. Stories of heart, of hope, and of unexpected heroes. This is a Black story. But more than that, it's a human one. And we're just getting started.